Welcome to the West Ham Voice. It's Thursday. This video is going out about mid-afternoon, early evening. But whatever time you're watching it, welcome to the channel. Welcome to the West Ham Voice. If you're new to this channel, please do hit the subscribe button if you're not a subscriber. And if you enjoy the video, do please hit the like button as well. This video is all about Karren Brady and the interview that she gave on Sky on their podcast on YouTube on Wednesday. Now, I was never really a punk lover. I didn't like punk music, let alone being remotely interested in what John Lydon ever had to say. But the other day, when Canning Town Len wrote a blog about not wanting to go back to the London Stadium again, he quoted a tongue-in-cheek statement that Lydon made at the end of a Sex Pistols concert that has as much resonance today as it had back then. And whilst listening to Karren Brady'S interview on the Sky podcast called The Boardroom, which is hosted by Mark McAdam and Jack Sullivan, the statement immediately came back into my head. And the statement goes as follows. Ever get the feeling you've been cheated? I'm sure you've heard about this video that this interview that she's done. So do look out for it on Sky after watching this show. Now, this is my interpretation of what Brady said in that interview. An interview that, she was given the questions in advance, by the way, which meant that she could rehearse her answers off to a T. Now, in my video, I'm going to try and explain how traditional West Ham fans continue to feel cheated, isolated, forgotten about, and left out of any real decision-making when it comes to club matters. And unfortunately, I think it's also going to highlight how Brady hasn't really gone out of her way to engage with the West Ham fan base, and how the West Ham business model that she probably created is more centered on attracting Premier League fans or fans of Premier League football rather than traditional West Ham fans, which of course has its own pitfalls. But at the end of the video, I'm going to offer up 5 things that I think the club could do, and if they really wanted to do them, of course, to try and re-engage with the fan base and maybe win some of them back. Not all will come back, maybe enough to make a difference, I don't know. So let's give some breakdown of some of the things that Brady said, some of the questions that she was asked throughout the interview, and how she cleverly managed to twist some of her answers to imply that the club had been more successful than it really has been, successful by moving to the new stadium. Now, I'll be doing my own fact-checking throughout the analysis. First of all, Brady made sure she reminded us of the financial state that the club was in under the Icelandics when Gold & Sullivan made a bid to buy the club. Now, true, we were in a rather precarious financial situation. No one can deny that. She stated that she was only going to stay for around 6 months to help Gold & Sullivan throughout the initial stages of taking over the club. But then she decided to stay on because she realized how special a club, how special a place it was, and how both Gold and Sullivan, how it meant an awful lot to both Gold and Sullivan because they were true West Ham fans. Fact, David Gold was definitely a West Ham fan. Dubious as to whether Sullivan ever was, but I'll be happy to be corrected on that if someone wants to tell me otherwise. And ironically, had she left after 6 months, I don't think we would ever have moved to the new London Stadium. It seems more and more obvious that it was her vision or her idea to move to the London Stadium, and it was her who sold or pushed the idea to Gold & Sullivan. She went on to talk about the importance of increasing revenue at the club and building a brand. That's also fact. And one of the things on Brady's mind was on how to attract more customers to West Ham. And I use that word customer deliberately, and you'll see why as I continue. You see, to Karren Brady, It's all about the income, not about the fan. For all she cares, you could be a fan of any club, any sport in the UK or outside the UK, out in the world, rather than being a traditional West Ham fan to go to the stadium. So long as you're buying a ticket to enter the stadium, then what does it matter where you're from? And brand was always going to be an important part to attract these new customers. As she said, it was important to increase revenue, and changing our brand name from West Ham United to West Ham United London was quite key. A simple ploy to attract fans of Premier League football from around the world. The West Ham fans would come anyway, wouldn't they? You see, West Ham London is something that fans of Premier League football from abroad can resonate with. Here is a Premier League football club based in London so that these fans can get that Premier League experience, and that's the aim. But there was probably less chance of fans of Premier League football wanting to visit Upton Park. Of course, we have had them, but fans, not so much of Premier League football, Upton Park. We had real West Ham fans coming from all over Scandinavian countries, etc. But they were like supporting West Ham as well as supporting their regular clubs. However, visiting a brand spanking new stadium in Stratford with a spot of shopping at Westfield straight after, what's not to like? Bring it on. Ka-ching. Brady spotted a business opportunity first and foremost. Get the stadium and the fans of Premier League football will follow. Her calculation on traditional supporters is that will come anyway because we're tied to the club through loyalty. We would never support any other team. But as figures shown on Wednesday, of the 50,000 original founder season ticket holders at the new London Stadium, only 21,000 remain. That means 29,000 original traditional West Ham fans have walked away. Sure, some may have returned since then, some may have passed away, sadly, and I would hope that the vast majority of those buying those 29,000 season tickets are actual real West Ham fans. But we know that there's a chunk of traditional supporters who have simply walked away since we've been at the London Stadium. But losing traditional fans, I guess, is a gamble that could eventually be the downfall of West Ham, and I'll sort of elaborate on that later on. When the London Stadium became available, the sale to West Ham fans was all about it being a world-class stadium with a world-class team playing in it, and that in next to no time, it will help elevate us to playing Champions League football. Well, we're still waiting for it to be a world-class stadium. We're still waiting for a world-class team. And we're still waiting for Champions League football. And the comments that Brady made about Europe is the next thing that really does have to be fact-checked. She alluded to the stadium move being a major factor in West Ham being successful in Europe. I don't think so. Could we have been in the Europa League and the Europa Conference League if we remained at the Bowling Ground? Absolutely we could. You see, it's the league position that we finished in, not necessarily playing at the London Stadium, that gave us European glory. Let's not forget, we've been scrapping for Premier League survival about almost as long as we have been playing in Europe since we moved to the London Stadium. We had exactly the same at the Bowling Ground. We didn't need to move to fight relegation, and we didn't need to move to be playing in Europe. Let's not forget that this isn't the first time we've had European success. The Cup Winners' Cup way back in 65, as well as being in the Cup Winners' Cup final in 76. All right, long time ago, but we were still there. Sure, things are very different now in getting into European competitions. It is much harder. But then this is why the Europa Conference League was created, so that clubs around Europe who do not regularly get into European competitions could get a taste of European football. And with the added incentive, of course, of getting into the Europa League if successful in winning the Europa Conference League, which is exactly what we did. Now, we could easily have done this even if we stayed at Upton Park. Brady recognised that some fans were upset about moving from the old ground. And true, some fans just didn't want that change. You've only got to listen to Everton fans who will move into their new stadium next season to hear that not all of them are really up for it. Goodison was home, just like Upton Park was home. But then you can see what Everton fans are going to get. They're going to get a very decent footballing stadium. And I dare say over time, they will become accustomed. All right, it's not going to be home, but they'll become accustomed to it because it is built for purpose. Whereas the London Stadium isn't. Now, look, had the promises of the stadium been kept, such as fans being closer to the pitch, just like it was at Upton Park, maybe the buy-in from West Ham fans would have been a lot easier in the transition. So as much as fans didn't want change, it was the half-truths and the false promises that many West Ham fans fell for and were upset about as deeply as the stadium move itself. But again, this was probably all part of Brady's plan in the first place. The stadium move was never about appeasing traditional fans. It was a business transaction first, with the fans coming a distant second. And then we move on to ticket prices. But again, what West Ham are planning to do with season ticket prices suggests an even bigger swing towards fans of Premier League football than it does to traditional fans. When Brady said that the club could only afford to offer fans the cheapest season tickets in the Premier League by moving to the new stadium, I make her right. It's fact. That fact certainly checks out. When the club sold off Upton Park, however, they no longer had to manage all the financial overheads of running a football stadium. The LLDC, or whoever it is that pays the bill now at the London Stadium, are responsible for that. We're simply the tenants. Hence, our operating costs are much less than what they were at Upton Park. So yes, they could afford to offer cheaper season tickets, and the first band of season tickets are indeed the cheapest in the Premier League. But yet again, there are two sides to every story. The price you pay for the cheapest season ticket usually results in having the poorest seats in the stadium. If you want a better view, then season ticket prices are more or less on a par with most other Premier League football clubs. So all they're trying to do is fill the cheapest seats. It's the same business model that any venue would use. The further away you are from the stage, the cheaper your ticket becomes. So it's not as if they were doing West Ham fans a favour. There is an impact when buying these cheaper season tickets, and that's the view. But if the club are successful with their plans to move concession tickets up to where these current cheaper season tickets are, then the tag of cheaper season ticket will be a thing of the past. Why? Because if they succeed in replacing the cheapest season tickets with concession tickets, then there will eventually be no need to offer cheap season tickets in the future. And who replaces all the concessions where they currently are around the stadium? Yep, you've guessed it. Even more customers who want to get the experience of going to a Premier League football match. Yet more evidence from Brady that her business model is centered on customers rather than traditional fans. When Brady stated that it's the fans and not the stadium that creates atmosphere, this is where I'm now a little bit torn. To be fair, I'm of the opinion that if there's something to be excited about, something to cheer about, then fans can certainly create a raucous atmosphere in that stadium. And we've experienced it, European nights, cup nights, and so on. But at the same time, the board have done very little to help improve atmosphere. The wall that was put up to separate the away fans and the home fans, the gaps between the upper and the lower tiers, and now the commitment by the club to encourage fans to sit down rather than stand, all goes towards sanitizing the atmosphere even further. But then, if the stadium is going to be filled with fans of Premier League football rather than traditional fans, then the atmosphere is only going to be sanitized even more. Now, whilst West Ham fans don't have total control of whilst West Ham itself doesn't have total control of changing all these things, they do have it in their power to side with the fans to try and get some improvements in the stadium to engender a better experience for fans. And I'm not talking about flag waving in the Bobby Moore lower. They can ask for the wall to be removed and replaced by mesh, which is used in almost every other stadium in Europe and something that I mentioned when the wall was first put up. They can engage with stadium owners to draw up plans on how potentially the lower and upper tiers can be brought closer together, or at least find a way of moving seats closer to the playing field from the west side for the west stand. They managed to do it behind the goals a few years ago, and it's obvious that the Billy Bond stand can't move, that's immovable, but they can look at ways of maybe bringing that west stand closer. They can fight harder on the side of fans to establish standing areas than seemingly to want to pick a fight with them to try and make fans sit down. They can be more careful in vetting who buys tickets so that we don't have away fans in the home end. But again, it's all about whether West Ham have the appetite for any of that. And it seems that they don't. So fans again will suffer, and the atmosphere will then suffer even further, which would lead to yet more traditional fans walking away. Then Brady moved away from West Ham for a moment and discussed the role she plays in the House of Lords, especially with the proposed football governance bill that's coming in. Brady said that she's against this bill because football is already heavily governed by the Premier League, the FA, FIFA, and so on. And yeah, that's true as well. Brady alluded to having to she wanted to protect football rather than to have any more implementation of governance, and that her input through the House of Lords is to offer advice on amending this bill so it doesn't harm football. Or perhaps she could have been more honest in saying she wanted to protect current owners' interests. But on a serious note, she stated that football had to be protected by ownership of unscrupulous owners. She had to be protected from unscrupulous owners. The irony on the day that we found out that Man United owners had saddled the club with £1 million debt by paying £1 billion debt by paying £1 billion of interest, I think, to themselves. Brady rightfully argued that the current pyramid system in football was basically being financed by the Premier League and how that's got to be protected. And yeah, absolutely correct. She also said that this new governance bill will be expensive and that all clubs would have to contribute, with some smaller clubs facing financial complications because of it. Again, that is true. And she's also correct in highlighting that things like the parachute payments to relegated clubs needed to stay in place in order to try and keep them competitive. Again, fact and true. But all these things that she mentioned that seem to be hindrances are things that she's actually putting right at the moment in the bill to make sure that the bill is fit for purpose. But what Brady didn't say is that this bill also plans to offer fans a little more say. And she kind of brushed, in fact, she didn't even mention that at all. She stated that fans ought to have a say, rightly, in how club matters, such as things like club colours and crests. But she didn't mention anything about fans having a proper say on how the club was run or how ticket prices and so on could be managed. And my understanding is that this is part of the new bill that's being considered. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding. Brady has already abandoned the various fan bodies that usually meet with her. And there's a suggestion that she no longer attends these meetings because she doesn't need to. And maybe the bill itself might require club owners or senior directors to attend these meetings. I could be wrong again. The only governance at the moment on ticketing is that of away tickets still being capped at £30. I think it's the Premier League that put that in place, and they've maintained that. It would be good to have governance on how ticket prices are done, as well as imposing some kind of protection on concession tickets. But let's see if that's going to be part of the bill or not. And all this goes back to my point about Brady looking for new customers and seemingly neglecting its core fan base. You see, Brady's business model right now all centers on West Ham remaining a Premier League club. If, God forbid, we ever get relegated again, that business model completely falls apart. Brady is alienating traditional West Ham fans. The experience at the London Stadium and the issue with concession tickets is taking its toll, and they're not returning to West Ham and they're not renewing their season tickets. Brady is so keen on selling the West Ham Premier League experience that if we're no longer a Premier League club, there's no longer a product to sell. If we got relegated, how many fans would go to watch football regularly at the London Stadium? 30, 35,000 at best? All of a sudden, a soulless 60,000 seater stadium will become even more soulless when it's less than half full, because those on concession tickets are pissed off and won't go. Those traditional fans are pissed off and won't go. And those seeking a Premier League experience will also not go, because if you've got relegated, there's no Premier League experience to be seen. Look, Brady is clearly a smart business person. And any smart business person will know that looking after your core clientele, in this case, traditional fans, is as equally as important in looking or chasing new customers as well. Brady could do something now to help protect income, because if relegation did happen in the future, by siding with the concession tickets, for example, imagine turning around and saying, yeah, you're right, we're not going to touch concession tickets. If we got relegated, you're likely to have those people deciding, well, you looked after me, we'll look after you, we'll still go to games. And this leads me on, interestingly, to the comment that Jack Sullivan made in the podcast about the day after the Europa Conference Cup win in Prague. He spoke about his pride and the emotion of seeing 6-year-old kids with their dads and granddads at the parade as the parade bus was passing through the streets of East London. Yet the irony in what he said was completely lost on Brady and McAdam, and probably Jack Sullivan himself. While Sullivan felt pride, the club are currently planning to do away with concession tickets, which could result in that 6-year-old kid with his dad and his granddad being unable to afford to go and watch West Ham United play in the future. It currently costs something like 270 quid to buy those 3 tickets for a 6-year-old, for a dad, and for a granddad. Irony. As I said, Brady is smart. So here are my 5 suggestions that could lead to a more harmonious relationship between the club and the fans. It won't fix everything, but at least it might show that the club somewhat cares about its core fan base. Number 1, the club should push for a better stadium experience with the club owners of the stadium. We may not get everything we want, but at least it will show that the club cares. For example, why not West Ham United finance the cost of bringing in architects to evaluate whether the big gaps between the top and the lower tiers can be reduced, and whether the West Stand can be brought closer to the touchline? And if these things can be done, then negotiate with the stadium to pay for some of these things to be implemented, because that outlay might be a big outlay, but it could lead to potential long-term gain with the fan base. Number 2, review the findings of the safe standing report that was issued a few years ago, and again negotiate with the stadium owners to fund or part fund safe standing areas in the stadium. Because if points 1 and 2 are implemented or seen that the club is trying to do something about them, then maybe fans would actually have some trust in the board, and maybe even the fans would probably be happy to pay just that little bit more on their season ticket prices for a better experience all round. Number 3, create a family zone, not a concession zone, or maybe it could be the same, I don't know, but a family zone to accommodate fans who don't want to stand. Maybe you could do it as a concession zone, I don't know, but certainly not doing it up in the gods. That's not what I'm talking about. Do it in core areas. This next one, number 4, is controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. Create a neutral zone for those who want to experience Premier League football. They can all go and sit together, take selfies on their phones to show the social media world that they're at a Premier League football match. That way, we know where the singing and the atmosphere won't be happening, whilst the rest of us can continue being football fans. And number 5, agree to retain concession tickets, season tickets, and not push for concession season tickets to end up being up in the gods. Look, these things can be done, can be negotiated, and it could win over the fans. I'm not saying that they will all succeed. Maybe the stadium owners won't care about safe standing or about closing the gaps, but at least we can show that we're willing to try. That will create a better relationship all round. And then Brady can do another one of these podcasts in the future to talk about the success she's having with proper fan collaboration, and that seeing season ticket renewals going up rather than them going down because of that board engagement. Who knows? She could do it. Will she do it? Will she want to do it? Does she care to do it? I don't know. Anyway, that's me. 26 odd minutes on. Thank you for listening and watching. Do leave your comments. Like I said, if you're not a subscriber of the channel, please consider subscribing. And regardless, please do hit the like button. That really means a lot. Do leave your comments. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I will see you all again very soon.